Second reading is Romans. There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Jesus Christ. For the law of the Spirit of life in Jesus Christ has set you free from the law of sin and of death. For God has done what the law, weakened by the flesh, could not do. By sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and to deal with sin, he condemned sin in the flesh, so that the just requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit. To set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the Spirit is life and peace. For this reason, the mind that is set on the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. And those who are in the flesh cannot please God. But you who are not in the flesh, you who are in the Spirit, since the Spirit of God dwells in you, anyone who does not have the Spirit of Christ does not belong to him. But if Christ is in you, though the body is dead because of sin, the Spirit is life because of righteousness. If the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies also through your Spirit that dwells in you. Holy wisdom, holy word.
Gospel according to St. Matthew from the 13th chapter. That same day, Jesus went out the house and sat beside the sea. Such crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there, while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path. The birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen." And again he told the parable. "Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches what is sown in the heart. This is what was sown on the path. As for what was sown on the rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet such a person has no root, but endures only for a while. And when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, that person immediately falls away. As for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth choke the word, and it yields nothing. But as for that was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and another 30. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Obviously, I'm a person, well, it may not be obvious to you, it's obvious to me. I love seeds. I have a book that I bought a little while back. It's called The Story of Seeds. And it goes through all the different kinds of seeds in the world. All these different plants that have all these different seeds. And the Bible has the smallest of all seeds is the mustard seed. But guess what the smallest seed in the world is? It's not the mustard seed. Nope. Nope, it's not the chia. It's the orchid. They're almost microscopic. They're so small. They have to be grown in special medium, and you have to find them almost with a microscope, at least with a handheld magnifying glass, but they're very, very, very tiny. But whenever the scriptures talk about seeds, what they're usually talking about, what Jesus is talking about, is God's good news that comes to us through Jesus. And it's always a seed that is sown by someone. For the longest time when I've heard this parable, I've always worried about, okay, now which soil am I? Am I the one that's in the path, or am I the one that gets, the seed around the thorns and they get choked out? Or am I good soil? I want to be the good soil. When we were in Minnesota this past few weeks, I looked at some of the plants that were coming up due to seeds. Now, we all know that whenever you plant a seed, what happens to the seed? I'm sure Dwayne knows what happens to the seed. Can you go dig it up and find it? Well, after a while, you can't. But if you dig it up at the right time, you can still find the remnants of that little seed. It bursts open, and the inside of it, the seed that we see, is really a protective layer. And inside is all that good stuff, sugars and starches that help the plant to grow, and it comes up through the ground, and eventually all of that just kind of disappears into the earth as the roots come out. It's the neatest thing. If you've ever seen it, it's just the neatest. If you haven't ever seen it, put a seed in a glass and put it up against the glass and then put some soil and watch that seed grow. It's the neatest process to watch. It'll just disappear after a while because it just rots into the soil. But it's sort of the way that the gospel takes root in our lives as well. And this last couple of weeks when I was in Minnesota, I saw the different fields. They have corn out there, Dwayne, believe it or not. And Randy, they have corn. And they have other things, but corn was what I saw. And I know the old saying, knee high by the 4th of July. Is that still said? You still say that, Dwayne? Yeah, sort of. You're just saying, we hope we don't get too much rain in defiance. Well, I saw the corn, and it was only about, it's probably this high. And I thought to myself, it's getting awfully close to the 4th of July. And I said to my friend, do you have that saying around here, knee high by the 4th of July? And she's, oh yes. We've just not gotten enough rain. And I said, well, I guess we need some rain pretty quick. Well, the next day it rained. And guess what? That corn went from this to about this. And by the time we left, that corn was just about knee high. Corn grows fast, doesn't it? It's a grass, and so it grows really fast. So I'm sure by now it's almost as tall as some of our corn, although some of our corn is even taller at this point. We've gotten too much rain. But the point about all of that is, who made that corn grow? Did I make it grow by saying, oh my goodness, it's not going to grow fast enough? Did I make it happen? No. Did the rain make it happen? Well, it helped. But as Paul tells us in one of his writings, one person planted, another watered, but who is it that gave the increase? It's God. God gives the increase. So it's interesting that Jesus talks about seeds, because seeds are a very important part of our lives. As a matter of fact, they make up a huge part of our diet. But seeds are also a very important way for us to show how God's kingdom and God's grace grow within us. You see, do you know how sowers sow? Not today. But sowers in the old days would pick up their gown like this, and they had all their seeds in. And you know how they would sow? The reason why Jesus says because there's so many seeds all over the place is because sowers would just go like this. Did you ever sow like that, Dwayne? I bet Randy has. Randy just throws it everywhere, don't you? You know what? That's the way Jesus does with the gospel. Jesus takes the gospel, and it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you are in life. It doesn't matter if you're the worst person that's killed 10 people. Jesus is still going to come out and throw the gospel all over. And it might land at your feet. It might land in your part of the garden. It's going to land everywhere. And for the longest time, I was worried about which kind of soil am I, and forgetting the most important thing. The most important thing is the sower comes and continues to sow. And sometimes those seeds spring up in places they're not supposed to. You know, we were on Lake Superior this past vacation, and I saw some trees growing in rocks. Have you ever seen trees grow in rocks? They grow through the rock and split the rock. And sometimes these are huge trees. So what Jesus is saying is, this is the reality that we know, that sometimes whenever we are unable to hear that word, or we're unable because of all the cares of life to even care about the word because we've got other things eating at us, He's going to continue to sow because He knows that eventually that good news is going to pierce our hearts. Eventually that good news is going to come inside of us, and it's going to do something, because it's not about me having enough faith. It's about that good news doing something to me. It's about that good news changing me. A cousin of mine wrote on Facebook recently, and it just kind of threw me aback. Because, number one, I know my cousin. I grew up with him, and I thought, wow, that was deep, what he wrote. And the other side of it was, wow, I can't believe he thinks like that. He said, you know, we have a drug problem in the United States. We have a problem with people taking opioids. We have a problem with people taking heroin. We have a problem with all kinds of different drugs. And he says, you hear all these different solutions. You hear all the solutions about, well, just let them die. Just let this happen. Just let that happen. And he said, you know what? Because of who I am in Jesus, I'm called to reach out and to help. I'm called to be that kind of person that gives the good news. And I'm not called to be the person that changes that one. I'm called to be the one who is faithful to Jesus. Faithful to Jesus, reaching out and doing what I can to help change the world. And I thought to myself, whoa, that takes a lot off my back, because it's not my job to save people. It's my job to do this all the time. That's all I'm called to do. That's all you're called to do. You're not called to judge. You're not called to judge yourself or others. You're called to be that one who just shares that seed and watches. Look at that. I remember whenever I planted seed there, maybe God is using some of that seed. You know what? I was a part of that. Thank God for what God has done in that person's life. Maybe what I said or what I did helped that person. I don't know. I don't know. But I can still hope and pray that that's what God is doing. You see, you and I are called. You and I are called just as Jesus tells us about this sower. He is the sower. But He's trying to tell His disciples, you too, in my name, are called to go out and sow, to share that good news with others. And if it falls on rocky soil, let it fall. If it falls on a soil where there are lots of thorns and cares of the world and they can't listen to that good news, let it fall. If it falls in the path and the birds of evil come down and try to eat it up, let it fall. Let it fall. And keep going. Keep doing what you've been called to do, sharing that good news by casting God's grace to the rest of the world. Amen.